Hello, it's Duncan. The hexagonal architecture, also known as ports and adapters, is a way of partitioning our applications. The business logic in the core of the hexagon defines its interfaces to the outside world as ports that are implemented as adapters surrounding the core. This decouples the core from specifics such as user interfaces, database and external services, making it easier to test and change. I think that our Gilded Rose app is already in this kind of shape, but today we'll find out by refactoring our build into yet more subprojects. I think we can just delete it. Code is dead. Here we are once again looking at our package structure. Last week we extracted this foundation package, the things that we wished were in the standard library. And this week I'm looking to separate the app into its fundamentals, the core business rules, that sort of thing, and those things that are specific to this particular app. So the way that it's configured and run and the way it does rendering, those sort of things. For those of you that know the hexagonal architecture, I suppose I'm trying to extract the core of the hexagon. Maybe I'll put a diagram in here. Oh, what do you know? I actually did. What am I trying to show here? Our whole application is this outer hexagon here, and it's talking to the outside world. So things like acceptance tests and Allison and value elf and Postgres. But all that talking to the outside world is through these adapters. So there's an HTTP adapter, which will accept requests and render responses. There may be a way that the acceptance test can talk to the app. There'll be a way that logging happens. And over here, we've got an adapter for value elf. When it comes to persistence, we have two adapters. One just works in memory. That's this one that talks to RAM, which I guess is inside our system, really. And another one here that talks to Postgres. Oh, I should say these solid arrows are data. So we're reading, oh, that arrow's the wrong way around. We'd be reading from value elf, but reading and writing to Postgres, and so on. So all the code, for example, that deals with HTTP for K, we would like to sit in this adapter layer, not in the core layer. In the core, well, right in the middle, we've got this foundation library, and everything can use that. I haven't shown those dependencies, but other dependencies are these dotted lines here. So we've got some idea of an app. It has data flow in and out of HTTP and in and out of testing, and it depends on updating and persistence and domain and pricing and implicitly on foundation. Our domain package is here. Pricing can talk to it, but it can't talk to pricing. And our pricing is going to get data from value off through the adapter. And similarly with persistence here, the app will be talking to persistence, and the persistence will be talking through an adapter to either memory or a database. Hope that's clear. Let's hand you back to Duncan. So I think we're probably aiming for pricing, updating, and domain to be in our core. That's just judging by their names, though. Let's see what actual code is in those packages. Here is our app. And in com Gilded Rose, we have, as we can see in this diagram, config. And here's domain. Let's see. So it's got things like IDs and items and non-blank strings and so on. Those are all promising core types. HTTP, well, that's about this particular app, so we can ignore that with luck. Persistence, well, that has our items. That's how we load and save things. And its implementation in DB items, which talks to Postgres. Looking down, we have pricing. That has the price stock list loader that talks to the external value elf service. Rendering, well, that's going to be top level. Testing, we're not worried about. Updating, let's have a look at that. That has item type and stock. And this is really our business rules package. So it looks like my initial idea that pricing, updating and domain belong in core is plausible. Let's see how that plan survives contact with the code. I'm going to start moving the very bottom thing here, the com Gilded Rose domain, and then we'll work our way up. We can't really start in the middle because if we did, we'd end up with circular dependencies. And believe me, because I've tried, if we try and do everything all at once, it just gets confusing. So then, we know we want another Gradle subproject, and we know we want to call it core. So let's add it into our settings.gradle in here. I don't know why it's so hard to get the number of quotes right. All I wanted to do there was delete one of them to make it work. But there we go. Okay, so now Gradle will go looking for a core project if we had one. We'll go back up to the top. We'll say new directory, which we're going to call core. There it is, and it's gone bold to tell us that IntelliJ knows that it's a Gradle subproject. It's going to need a build.gradle.ats, and the simplest one we've got at the moment is in Foundation. So let's just copy that over into there. And taking a look at it, we get our Kotlin's convention plugin, which allows us to build and test. And let's remove all dependencies for now, so that we can add back only the ones we need. We will give ourselves some source directories. We'll have source main Kotlin and source test Kotlin. There they go. And now with luck and a following wind, we can take our domain here and say refactor, move the package or directory to another source root of core main. Good. And now we expect that not to be able to build because there will be things in our app that now can't see those classes. Well, we may be right, but we can't find out yet because it turns out that item, which we've just moved, itself can't compile. And it can't compile because it needs a result for k. So let's go into the build.kotlin and we'll add that dependency. So it's going to be libs result for k. Now, is this going to be an implementation or an API dependency? Looking at item, we can see that result for k result appears in its interface. So the constructor here, for example. So that's a sign, I think, that this should be an API dependency. Does that build? Well, no, it doesn't, and for the reason that we first thought it wouldn't build, which is that our app now can't see things like item. So we'll go to our app, build.gradle, and we say that now needs to depend on the project of core. Again, we have the decision about API or implementation, and as with Foundation last week, I'm going with API so that anything that uses our app can also see the packages in core. Oh, and that built. We'll give ourselves a clean build to check everything is okay. But it isn't. What's gone wrong? Okay then, what have we got here? Item type, smart cast to local date is impossible because sell by date is a public property. Let's have a look at that. Well, this is an interesting little Kotlinism. It turns out that if item is compiled at the same time as code that uses it, then the compiler believes this required not null here will lead to this item sell by date here not being null. But when there are different modules, it doesn't believe that. Now, sooner or later our updating is going to end up in our core, but I think what we'll do is we'll fix this properly, which is to say we're going to extract a val here, which is sell by date, and that is going to be the thing that require not null passes out, and then we can just use that in there. We'll have another look for the require not nulls in here. Here's another one. Interestingly, we don't have the same issue here. And that, I think, is because is after is on local date. And because that's Java, it can't say that this item sell by can't be null. So that's why it's not complaining, but I think we'll do the same job here. So we'll say sell by date is require not null, that thing, and we'll just use that in there. And I can see another one down here. And that's all of them. Good. Try to build again. And life is sweet. Let's commit that. We've just changed item type. This build.gradle is now referencing core. And in core, we've moved ID and all of our domain types, and we have its own build. So this is extract core subproject with domain package. Oops, I need to actually select them. There we go. Okay then, so that was our domain package done. That was relatively easy. I think the next logical one is this updating. So let's have a look at that. We've already seen it. It has item type and stock. And here's stock. Oh, before I go on, I should say that there aren't actually any tests of any of our domain types here. So I haven't had to move those into here. That is a little bit odd because we've got things like non-blank string that have logic in them, especially non-negative int here. But these were extracted from code that was already tested and we didn't add specific tests for them. I remember remarking about that at the time. It doesn't seem to have caused us any problems, so I guess it's okay. Anyway, back to updating. Let's just try moving that. So we say move that to a source root of core updating. Let's give it a go. And lo and behold, that's gone from there and it has arrived here. So let's build. And that fails. Might have been nice if IntelliJ had warned me before it allowed me to do that, but we are where we are. What's the issue here? Well, it's that stock depends on items, and items is defined in our persistence package. So looking at our diagram, I guess that's this line here, that updating depends on persistence. But we decided that updating is a core concept, whereas persistence is on the edge of our hexagon or an outer layer of our onion. So now we've understood the issue. Let's see whether we can undo moving and get us back to a place where we build. Good. So let's return to app and see that problem. So this is updating And here's our stock type. And you can see that it depends on persistence items, and persistent stock loading error. Now the common technique for dealing with this sort of issue is dependency inversion. Instead of having updating depending on persistence, we'll make both updating and persistence depend on something else. Now often we invent another package or module for that thing, but in this case I think that items and stock list loading error could themselves just be part of our domain. Let's remind ourselves about items. Here it is, it's just an interface giving the operations for loading and saving. So I think maybe if we just took those two things, cut them out of here, and put them into our domain over here, IntelliJ now tells us that analytics event that is implemented by our stock list loading error will not be accessible in our core. Now that's true, but analytics event is in our foundation package, and we've got no problem with core depending on foundation. So I think we'll refactor anyway to make that happen, and then we'll say our core here is allowed to depend on the project foundation. Does that get us building? And we seem to have built. Again, we ask ourselves the question, should this be implementation or API? And again, I think the answer is API, in this case because items here declares this stock list loading error in its interface, and so anyone that uses items needs to know about stock list loading error. So again, I think that's going to be API. And the follow-up from that is if we go back to our app project and look at its build, because it's depending on core and core is exporting foundation, it means that the app doesn't need to depend explicitly on foundation. I hope. And I seem to be right. Good. And while we're here, we remember that core was exporting result for K, so it also means that app doesn't need to do that either. Let's run our tests. It's all good, and I'll just do a clean build because we have been messing around with Gradle. Splendid. I think that's worth a commit. We've updated some things because we've moved the package for stock list loading error and items. That's the same thing again. Now here's an interesting one. This is in-memory items tests. This is currently in common Gilded Rose persistence. I suppose that now that items has moved into domain, maybe we should change that package. So I'll do that and move the file. And I expected that to work, and choose destination directory. Okay, just plain bug, I think. Come back to that one. What do we have here? More here, more here, more here. Well, you get the gist. And here's our in-memory items that we wanted to move into domain. And move the file, and I don't know whether anything happened. Maybe it did this time, so that we can optimize those imports. Maybe you can trust me to check the other things. Actually, that little refactoring debacle has reminded me that we need to do something with the tests. This is our in-memory items tests. This is the one that we changed to domain, but I think this at least, and probably the items contract, should move over into our core package. There's a problem there though, and that is that in-memory items is defined in the test fixtures for the app. I don't really want to make that change though with broken things here, so I'm going to move that back to persistence for now. That will mean that we need to import that, although IntelliJ can't now see it. Try build. Everything has gone to pot. I'm going to try clean build from Gradle, see whether that's happy. It isn't either. So fixture is lost in memory items. Everything's lost in memory items. Okay, well I just had to undo all the things I was doing in the diff window. That's got us back to an even keel. So I think we'll commit this as a checkpoint. I would say good, but Okay then, we now realize that we've got this items contract in memory items tests still living in our app tests. I'm going to note that down and fix it later, because the swamp that we're trying to drain at the moment is moving this updating package into core. So now our item type should depend on only things in the domain, good, and our stock likewise, splendid. So I think we should be able to take these things and say refactor, move to a source root of core main. Good. And if we're lucky, we should be able to do the same with the tests. So those are in here, and we should be able to say refactor move to a source root of core tests. And we saw this last week where IntelliJ just seems to get confused. It normally means there is a problem, so let's cancel that. Yes, nothing happened. So we'll try dragging them, cut them from there, and move them into core source test. Maybe the problem is we don't have the package to go into. New package, com, Gilded Rose, dating. We will paste them in there. We want everything to go refactor. Waiting for usages. What's waiting for usages? La 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 la. Oh, there we go. Okay, so days to tests uses function timeString, which will be inaccessible after the move. So it looks like we have a little helper function that is defined in app. Is that our only issue? Yes, but quite a lot of it. So let's refactor anyway. Actually, I've had a change of heart. I'm going to undo that last move. And in fact, I'm just going to revert everything that's happened at the moment. So let's roll that all back and check we can build. Good. And the reason for rolling back is that I realized we should fix our test issue first. And that's because at the moment our app has this test fixtures source root, and that contains this test data class, which has a nice little factory for items for tests and items with no price and so on. It also has an empty domain here. Let's just delete that. Now we've moved item into core, it feels like we should move these factories into core as well. And if core is going to have its own test fixtures, then that's a place that this in-memory items can live as well. And then we can move that time function into there as well. I think we may end up going into fast forward for bits of this. Oh goodness, that was horrible, and it's not finished yet. Please don't judge me. I made the mistake of moving item and October the 29th, etc. into a different package, and IntelliJ just doesn't fix those up easily. So where I am now is that core has a test fixtures that includes this testing package with the test data in it. And I think we could easily move in-memory items now into there. Let's just see if that refactor works. And run. Ooh, good. But I haven't been able to get rid of this, and import is just not a thing. But it turns out, after banging my head for goodness knows how long, that it is there. IntelliJ just can't be bothered to show it to me. Ta-da! Okay. Good. Okay, time for another commit. I'm going to ignore the changes in app because they're basically just places where packages have changed, except for this build.gradle.kts, where we are now pulling in the test fixtures from Project Core. And that is because we've moved the in-memory items tests and the items contract and the in-memory items and test data all into the core. And it is now using test fixtures. Okay, so this is moving test utilities into core from app. Okay then, finally, I think we're in a position to move updating into core. Let's have a go. We'll just say refactor move to source root into not test but updating. That seemed happy. little exploratory build. All good, and we'll do the same with tests. So we'll take these updating tests and we'll say refactor move to core test. And again, we seem to be good. Splendid. Swift build. Ooh, I do find it frustrating when IntelliJ allows me to build. Well, it had allowed me to build, hadn't it? Because we both saw it run the tests. Never mind. This persistence event source was just an experiment. I think we can just delete it. Code is dead. And that will then be all okay. It will build cleanly on the command line. And we can commit that as moving, updating into core. Commit. Here's our new package diagram then, and you can see that one of the effects of the change is that we've lost the ability to see that updating depends on domain, because this diagram isn't looking at the source of our core package. Maybe I'll fix that later, as well as moving common Gilded Rose pricing into our core, because there's one thing that I really want to do before we finish, and that's to move this persistence package out of our app. Let's remind ourselves why. This is all that's left in persistence now. It's this DB items. And if you've been following me since Christmas, you'll know that the tests for DB items are really quite slow. You'll know that the tests for DB items are really quite slow. They take most of the time that the tests of our app take to run. Here's the timeline of that test run. You can see the whole test took a second, but that the DB items tests were running almost all of that time. They are the critical path. Now this items interface here is in core though, we can move DB items out into its own Gradle subproject. I'll just do that now. Okay then, well that builds. And now let's just run the tests of our app. And here's that test run now, and everything is over and done within half a second because we don't have to run the database tests to check our application logic. You can see now the long running ones are the ones that use HTTP. So what was that change? Well, we created a database project, we moved DB items into it from the app, we moved the tests into it from the app, and we moved the migrations into it from the app. Its build now includes Flyway and Duke and all of the malarkey to get that working. So that has now disappeared from our main build here, or at least it would have done had I gotten round to it. So I can get rid of that. It now just depends on our database project. It doesn't need to know about Postgres and Hikari or Duke. It doesn't need to know about the Duke generator and Flyway and so on and so on. So our main project build has become significantly simpler. And we can commit that with move DB items into its own subproject. Oh, before I go, I should just say that configuring here, which used to have the DB config and how to convert a DB config to a DSL context, I've moved this code out, just leaving the code that depends on HTTP4K, so that our database project doesn't have to depend on HTTP4K's environment. So that means we have configuring in here in persistence, and that includes our database config, how to create a DSL context from it, and then how to get a Hikari data source from that. On reflection, I don't know why this is public. I will take a look at that so that you don't have to. So we'll go ahead and commit that. So then here's our revised package diagram, and compared to before today, you can see that our pricing used to depend on persistence, but now it just depends on domain. And the same, interestingly, is true of rendering. So rendering used to depend on persistence. I suspect that was one of the error types. And now it only depends on the domain as well. Now we're a lot cleaner. I may or may not get around to moving pricing out of the app. I do think for now we've all suffered enough. So then, after all this fuss with Gradle, what's next for Gilded Rose? You know, I really don't know yet. We'll have to go and reintroduce ourselves to Alison and see what's next on her list. If you're as eager to find out as I am, then please subscribe to the channel. Like this video to help other people find it, and please consider buying the book that I wrote in that price called Java to Kotlin: A Refactoring Guidebook, details of which are on the show notes below. Thanks for watching.